لقاء مع الجلسة الثانية لهذا المؤتمر، والتي جاء عنوانها مكتبات المخطوطات ومراكز تراث المخطوطات في إفريقيا. في هذه الجلسة نلتقي ومجموعة كبيرة ومقدرة من الأساتذة المتخصصين، ويرأس هذه الجلسة البروفيسور محمد دياغيتي. معنا كذلك الأستاذ الدكتور أحمد شوقي بنبين، ومعنا الدكتور جيم عثمان، ومعنا كذلك بروفيسور جوناثان يوجين بروكوب. في هذه الجلسة سنحاول إلقاء الضوء على مكتبات المخطوطات في
And this session we will speak about manuscript libraries in Africa and some of the written heritage centers in Africa for manuscripts written in the Arabic script. And those who were not with us in the first panel yesterday, I want to remind that the first panel discussed the historical traditions of Arabic script manuscripts in Africa over 2 panels that were concluded yesterday. And in this panel, chaired by Professor Diagayeté,
is the General Directors of Ahmed Baba Institute
إسلامية بتمبكتو مالي، حصل على درجة الدكتوراه في العلوم الإسلامية من جامعة الزيتونة بتونس عام 2007، وهو متخصص في دراسة مخطوطات مالي القديمة، وخاصة تلك المتعلقة بشعب الفلان. وقد ناقش رسالة الدكتوراه المتخصصة بعنوان
contribution of the Fula people of Mali to Islamic civilization during the 18th and the 19th century. Dr. Diagayeté has curated several exhibitions of ancient manuscript in Mali, South Africa, and also Germany. He also has been like a fellow researcher at the University of Cape Town, South Africa, and the École Normale Supérieure de Lyon, France, and in the University of Beijing in China, and the University of Champaign-Urbana in USA. And he also participated in several conferences, national and international ones. Some of his work has been published along with articles, some of which are published and others are in the process. And he has been the General Director of the Ahmed Baba Institute's Higher Learning and Islamic Research in Timbuktu since the 2018. So I would like to give him the floor. So would you please come and take the floor? Thank you very much. Dr. Medhat, for this introduction. In the name of the God, the merciful, the compassionate, and peace be upon Prophet Muhammad. Maybe there is something something with the internet connection. I think that we can start now this session. We can start this session by calling upon Dr. Diagayeté is back. I would like to salute all the organizers of this conference, and especially the Bibliothèque Alexandrina, and also the workforce that is doing that for organizing this very interesting conference today. with about this session, we have three experts that will have their presentations. We have Professor Ahmed Chaouki Binebine, and also Professor Drame, and also so we have the Professor Jonathan Eugene, and each one will talk about a very interesting subject. The first professor, Ahmed Chaouki Binebine, he's a very well-known person in the manuscript world. He's the director of the Royal Treasury, Bibliothèque al-Hassania in Rabat, in Morocco. And I'll give him the floor very soon to present the information. So, Mr. Ahmed Chaouki, you can start now.
In the name of God, and peace be upon our Prophet Muhammad. I'd like to thank the organizers of this conference for inviting me to participate in this scientific conference that tackles the manuscript libraries and written heritage centers in Africa. It is a very interesting topic, and it's a new topic. And the organizers chose well. And a long time ago, I suggested to the Islamic Library and the BA in a historical reading, a historical paleographical and codicological reading of the African manuscripts book written in Arabic, which I'll be brief in my presentation. It is not enough, but I will give a brief account about the history of this manuscript book and the paleography and the codicology of this manuscript book and its production. And of course, if anybody has a question, we'll leave this to the Q&A. The African manuscript book written in the Arabic script is part of the Arabic written tradition, and it is the greatest heritage known by man because of its central place in the Arabic culture. And this abundance is for three reasons. First, the spread of Islam, and the second is the spread of the Arabic language, and the third is the spread of the Arabic writing in the different regions and different languages. And one of the great scholars in Europe, Geoffrey Rupert, he detailed the languages that borrowed the Arabic script. So the African manuscript book is part of the Arabic script manuscript. So the Arabic manuscript is the origin. And of course, we should know less about the African manuscript in the Arabic script than the Arabic manuscript itself. And I tried to answer some questions in my presentation, about the African manuscript book. And of course, I'll not have the time to tackle all the aspects of this manuscript. So which nations or which peoples produced this book in West Africa? The ethnicities and races that inhabited these regions over the centuries, which were by the hundreds. So it's very difficult to go into their dialects and languages and history. So people who inhabited in sub-Saharan Africa, the Tuaregs, the Amazighs, and others. And also, it is difficult for the researcher to know the earliest contact with these inhabitants by the Arab merchants and explorers. So who were the first Muslims to set foot in these regions? All of these are questions, and we don't have convincing answers. Also, one of the opinions that the first contact was by the in Sijil Masa by the Arabic or the Arab merchants, and also the Rustumids and the Ibadite, Karajites, and the Kairawanis, and some Libyan merchants. And the Africans were introduced to the Maliki school of thought in the 5th and 6th centuries, when the Sinhajis lived in these regions, and they were influenced by this school of thought and its rules, which continues to this day. There were scientific and scholarly centers that were founded in these places, but it is difficult to know who were the founders. It is a very complex topic. And one question remains, when was the beginning of the African manuscript book? And some believe that this starts in the time of the Mourabitines in the 5th, and this we know in the 5th Hijri century in Mauritania. So many of the African scientists, scholars like Ahmed Baba and others emerged at this time. But unfortunately, we don't find any books that are dated before the 7th century Hijra. And what we know about the sub-Saharan African region is subject to speculation. In reality, we have not yet got to the study part and the extraction of conclusions. The African heritage is still in the collection phase, despite all of the efforts that were exerted by the researchers in the recent decades. And this, in my opinion, is for many reasons, the 3 reasons, including the marginalization of African heritage by Western researchers who did not think to look for this heritage except after the liberation of this African region in the post-colonial era. And there was also the Furqan institution that initiated this effort, and also the French Orientalist Audace in Octave Audace in 19th century, who researched the most important manuscripts, African manuscripts. The second reason is the French colonialists did not have a cultural plan to advance the culture, and one of the Orientalists say that this heritage up until today, this was an American scholar who commented on the French colonial era and how it did not give special attention. And also the African heritage did not get the same importance that its Arabic counterpart got, and this was because of the active research on the Arabic heritage. And what Udas did is a drop in the ocean of what French Orientalists did. And so what about the paleographic and codicological aspects? I want to say something about this when it comes to its history, sources, contents, and the Arabic knowledge that it tackled in its short history. So this manuscript heritage in African libraries goes back to the 19th and 20th centuries. And only a few were written before that era. When it comes to sources, we have Qurans and books on jurisprudence, but it remains most commonly an oral tradition. In Tariq Fatash history and the Sudan, and the many books that we have usually that we have the oral tradition of dialogue, holding dialogues in a Q&A fashion with these scholars, and this remained the main method. And we know that what the scholar Al-Batiba said in this respect, and this today, he said that when a scholar dies, it's like a library has been burned.
When an old man dies, the library burns.
And this tradition has tackled many of the Islamic and linguistic and grammar and Sufi knowledge in the Maliki school of thought. And this was commentaries, marginalia, especially in the Raja's meter that was used in many of the jurisprudence and grammar books, and they wrote books in the scholarly translations, in addition to the Ahmed Baba compositions, who the Bartali of Mauritania documented in Fath al-Shakur fi Akhbar Ulama Takrur, and it is a book in the scholarly translations in the 11th and 12th centuries Hijrah. And the manuscripts that were brought into Africa through trips from or explorers coming from Hijaz and other places. And so and they brought with them, of course, the love of the book because of their contact and attending the councils of important scholars like Suyuti Zabidi. And they also invited Abd Rahman Suqin al-Asimi. And this preserved heritage from the different regions some of the Western scholars in the recent decades called for cataloging it, and John Hanwick he's the one who made the first catalog in Nigeria, which was funded by the Furqan institution in London. And I have to speak about the paleographic aspects and the marginalia. The written or the manuscript book needs a close inspection and observation. And what we currently have of this heritage will not allow for this, and so we will rely on the observations of some scholars like John Hanwick and Rebstock of Germany, who took interest in this, and they passed some judgments on the manuscript, African manuscript book, that are not yet comprehensive conclusions. What about the paleography? The African script is Arabic script. So how did it reach these regions, and what are the different types? It was not associated with the Arabic script, was not associated with Islam, because it goes through the pre-Islamic era. And this is a topic for another discussion. The origin are pre-Islamic, as I said, and some said that its origin is the Musnad script or the Hamiri script from Yemen, or that it is Aramaic that was taken from the Napati script, and which is the Hijazi script that moved to Kufa, and it was improved and refined there. So it was called the Kufic script, which became the main script for the Arabic manuscript. The Kufic script that we find in memorials and gravestones, this Kufic script. Ibn Khaldun said it's originally Andalusian, because he found some of the Qurans copied in West Africa and in the Andalusian script and the Kufic script. And Bivar, the English scholar, that the African script has two origins. The first is the Qayrawani script, which originated from the ancient Kufic, and it is the oldest script in these regions. And the second is the Andalusian Farsi script, which was called the Sudani, or the Sudanese script, or the Sudanic script. The script in these African countries varies with the differences in groups and the dialects. So it differs from the Wolof script to the Hausa and the Fulanis and Swahili. It has different way of writing. So borrowing the Arabic script to use for the African dialects is not new, because many of the languages of the ancient world borrowed the Greek script for Coptic, for instance, but it also borrowed from the ancient Egyptian. The Arabs, the Persians borrowed the Arabic script to express the sounds that did not exist in Arabic. Many of the world languages use the Arabic script: Turkish, Urdu, Kurdish, Persian, and others. And the scholar Jeffrey Roper traced this, and he found 129 languages, and this was called transliteration by the scholars, which means borrowing the letters from one language to write another. So this transliteration this, of course, was researched a lot, but I will not go into details now. Sometimes they added dots or symbols that did not exist in Arabic in order to express sounds that are found in these languages and not in Arabic. And some of these nations have let go of the Arabic script and they borrowed the Latin script for writing their languages, like Turkish in the with the advent of Ataturk, and the Kurdish and Hausa. As for copying in West Africa, it is the same way of writing in Arabic, and it was adopted by artisans or copyists, where they are given paper and gold in order to write. And so they will get half the gold sum, these copyists, in order to copy these books. As for the group copying, this is known as the collective copying. It is a known phenomenon where the copyists work together and a number of copyists work on the manuscript. It is called Pesia in Europe, or piece, where the manuscript is divided into parts that are copied by a number of copies. And this collective copying appeared in Europe in the 13th century common era with the emergence of universities. And of course, the purpose was to do the work with more quickly and to produce more copies. And one of the scholars would be given the assignment to revise what these copyists have copied. And the Pesia was known in Greece, ancient Greece, and in Western Europe, and in West Africa. It had to do with the copying of the book Al-Muhkam Ibn Sayyida in Timbuktu in 981 Hijri. And there is a treasury copy in 28 volumes. As for the paleographic aspect and the codicology, which has to do with the shape and the method of writing and its production and its numbering. And so the African manuscript followed the Arabic manuscript, where it shows a codex, the codex as its shape, or it's as a vessel. And they called the manuscript book the pen copy, or the pen copy. And it is this bound leaves and not unnumbered, except in rare occasions. And the catchwords is usually used in many cases in order to organize or order the fascicules of this manuscript book. And this led in many of these books to the loss of the leaves, where it is sometimes very difficult to identify the title of the book or its author and its subject. And in this case, the researcher of African heritage should know about the Arabic heritage and the Arabic knowledge in order to arrive at the name of the book or the subject of the book and the name of the author. And this book is not different from the writing in the Arabic manuscript, where the first page holds the title and the name of the author, and maybe some phrases might be added. And then there are spaces in between the lines. And also we find in the marginalia and the commentaries. And in the African dialects, they call this Ajami, which is the Arabic script used in African manuscript books. As for the final leaf, it holds or carries the name of the copyist and maybe some poems. As for the date of the copy, usually we don't find that in the colophon. So in the dating or the person who is dating the copy, usually they calculate the phrases and they call it in Africa Eksh. And the Moroccans, in order to calculate the numerical value of the letters, which was followed by the Africans. And we have it before us. It is the same in Morocco. The Africans followed the Moroccans in calculating the numerical value of the letters. As for the writing material and its tools, some of the rare parchments from the Middle Ages, the paper, and we know karit, a Chinese word that came to Arabic through Persian. Kort is Chinese, which became karit in Arabic. Karit is the main material used for writing in West Africa. So when was it introduced into Africa, and through which routes? All of these questions are difficult to answer. And who would read in the Tarikh al-Fitash and Tazkarat al-Nisyan and the Ahmed Baba manuscripts might not find any mention of this material. But al-Hassan al-Wazan al-Gharnati al-Fasi, in his book Wasf Afriqiya, he spoke about the trading in books in Timbuktu in the 16th century Common Era, and he did not say one word about this material. But some researchers believe that Karid reached Africa through Morocco with the commercial exchange between Europe and Africa, or maybe through Libya, through the geographical contact and commercial exchange between Libya and Africa. And the French explorer, French scholar Arms, and the French historian Boujard said that carrot or paper was first produced in Madagascar, but we do not have any historical or codicological evidence to prove this. And some of the experts in the African manuscript book that the preserved manuscripts were copied on European paper, especially the Italian paper that carries the watermark. And not all paper carries the watermark. Every paper, they believe that every paper comes, if it doesn't, then it comes from the East, but no. All the papers in Europe started without a watermark, which emerged in Italy. Excuse me, Dr. Chaouki. We have 1 minute left. And they used a traditional pen. And the ink also was made from local plants. And finally, I want to say that these are glimpses of the history of the manuscript book in West Africa. This is still virgin territory that calls for the efforts of more researchers and historians, philologists and codicologists to uncover the history of this book. And we have, of course, Mohamed bin Sharifa. There were some books, he found books that were considered lost when he wrote a book about this science, about this scholar from the 7th century of Hijrah in Andalusia that was found in the Timbuktu libraries. And of course, this shows how rich these libraries were and that there is so much to look into that is left to further research and hear you and interpret what you're saying. Okay, now we can hear you. Please keep your microphone on so we can hear you. I had a technical problem and I was trying to activate the microphone. Now we can hear you. Thank you very much, Dr. Mohamed Chaouki Binebine, for your important presentation that pointed to the spread, the beginning of writing in Africa. What was used by the copyists in the African continent. And I would thank you very much, sir,
for your intervention. And we really benefited from your intervention and presentation, and we were able to understand the history of these manuscripts in Black Africa. And I would like to give the floor to the second speaker, so Dr. Djim Drame. He's a researcher and head of the manuscript and research in the Fundamental Institute of Black Africa in Dakar in Senegal. in the Diop University. And he will talk to us on the heritage of manuscripts. He also started studying with his family and studied Quran, and he went to Azhar University. If you can hear me, Mr. Drame, so if you would like to start, you have like 25 minutes to have your presentation. This means that you have till 2:10 exactly. So here you go, the floor is yours. Jim Drame, so you have the word now. So the floor is yours, Dr. Drame. Yes, I can hear you. تفضل سيدي بالحديث. I would like to thank you, Mr. Diagayeté. In the name of the God, the merciful, the compassionate, peace be upon him. Let me first thank the Library of Alexandria and all the organizers of this conference to allow me to have my humble character here. I'm really humbled by this act. And I would like to thank Egypt as a president and as Azhar and as a government, and Dr. Ahmed Tayyib, the great Imam of Azhar. So people know that I went to the general division of Arabic language. So what I have now is heritage centers in Black Africa. It is Arabic script, manuscript. There is nothing, no doubt, that the heritage is one of the most important things that we have to focus on and we have to preserve. That's why I see. So it affects a whole nation, and we understand what happened in a period of time, and the Islamic culture and heritage has participated in building the mankind concepts, and the scientists understood. So they understood and they followed the Quran in the way that it is stipulated on how we use the paper and the pen for writing. So we say that Yaqut al-Hamawi and others, they have a very important role for having these different kinds of participations. And because I would like to participate in the do you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah. Yeah, we can. And the establishment of the manuscript division and the Islamic studies. And then we started to divide it. And we have so the connection, the network is not that good. Can you hear me, Dr. Diagayeté? So you can go to Dr. Brock and then we go to Mr. Diagayeté.
We'll continue with the presentations we have.
We will talk to
I'll give
John.
the floor to Dr. Jonathan Eugene Brokop, who is professor of history and religious studies at the Pennsylvania State University, a student of early Muslim legal texts. He is the author or editor of several books, including early Maliki law and the Cambridge Companion to Mohamed. And Mohammed's heirs, the rise of Muslim scholarly communities. Dr. Brokop will give a presentation titled The History and Importance of the Kairouan Manuscript Collection. And Dr. Brokop, the floor is yours for 25 minutes. Now it is 5 minutes to 2, which means you have until 20 minutes past 2. Thank you very much, sir. And thank you.
So again, thank you especially to the Islamic Manuscript Association and to the Alexandrian Library for putting on this conference, to Madame Dalia and her team, and also to the language interpreters. We very much appreciate your work. I'm delighted to be here to speak about one of the important collections in Africa. As it has been said, North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa are very much closely tied, and we will see many of those connections, I think, today, and with both my presentation and that of Professor Chaouki. There's a lot to do in terms of future research, but we see many connections already. So as everyone in this conference knows, Kairouan, Tunisia is one of the oldest Islamic cities in the world, the capital of the province of Ifriqiya, founded in 670, the Common Era, by Uqba ibn Nafi', and quickly grew in size and stature. When Baghdad was built, Kairouan was already home to an important group of scholars of Islamic law, theology, Quranic, and other fields. By the time Cairo was established, Kairouan was attracting students from as far away as Iraq and Spain. The collection of manuscripts located in the National Laboratory for the Preservation and Conservation of Parchment and Manuscripts in Kairouan is the legacy of this scholarly activity. Outside of Tunisia, however, few know of the existence of this collection, and if they do, it's because of the pages of this famous Blue Quran that has been taken apart and sold to important museums throughout the world. In contrast, fragments of other Quran manuscripts in the Kairouan collection have worn pages and student remarks on them. This is even more the case with legal manuscripts in the collection, which often include corrections and marginal notes, collation remarks, in addition to dated auditions, sama' remarks. These fragments are hard to read and even harder to appreciate, but they point to a very different history of this collection than a mere storehouse for expensive Qurans. Our first modern description of the collection derives from Mohamed Bey Bayram, a Tunisian dignitary who gave a talk in Cairo in French, which was later translated into Arabic and published in Al-Muqtataf, a leading Arabic literary journal, in 1897. Bayram traveled to Kairouan in September of 1896 by horse-drawn tramway and found the manuscripts in a space in the front of the mosque enclosed by a tall wooden screen known as a maksura, and that you see here to the bottom left. The maksura was a controversial construction meant to shield the local ruler from the masses, providing both security and privacy. Byram describes what he calls a second maksura, which is actually these rooms here you can see to the right of the mihrab in this schematic. And this was part of the connection between the mosque and the Dar al-Imara. In this second maksura, as he calls it, there were artifacts from Kairouan's history strewn on the ground and 2 cabinets. These cabinets were full of manuscript pages, as he says, gathered in bundles without order or organization. The large with the small with the large, a page from this Quran and a page from that one, along with pages from other books in various places and so forth, all covered by thick dust and spider webs. Byram's report on this collection spurred the Protectorate into action, and a team soon set to work organizing the manuscripts. While some pages of the Blue Quran may have found their way into Ottoman and European hands at this time, the collection as a whole remained largely intact. The best general history of the Kairouan Library, written by Venno Schwartz in 1986, suggests that the Quran manuscripts were the first to be collected in the Great Mosque, with the manuscripts on other subjects added later. In making this claim, Schwartz pulls together 2 lines of evidence. First, that the Qurans in the mosque were for study and devotional reading. In comparison, we know that Kairouan also had a Dar al-Hikmah, where they were teaching astronomy and philosophy and natural sciences. The study of Islamic law and history took place in scholars' homes. And so this concept of the Quran being uniquely attached to the mosque is what Schwartz is arguing. His second line of argument is based on the physical evidence of endowment remarks on Qurans. And some of these on early Qurans in the mosque state that they were explicitly donated to the mosque for the purposes of study. However, legal manuscripts also must have been part of the collection from a very early date. Today, if we look at manuscripts that we can date through Samat remarks and Waqf and other remarks, 23 legal manuscripts can be dated to the 3rd century Hijri, while only 1 Quran fragment can be securely dated to this period. These and other manuscripts were clearly studied and commented upon for generations until the collection fell into disuse in the 6th century Hijri. The relative neglect of these manuscripts that so bothered Mohamed Bey Bayram in the 19th century is part of the reason that the collection remained virtually frozen in time, leaving one of the oldest intact collections of Arabic manuscripts in the world. They are like artifacts in situ, providing us much more information about the texts they preserve and the community that produced them than any individual manuscript could on its own. This is quite in contrast to Arabic manuscripts found today, for example, in Europe and in North America. To the best of our knowledge, the collection appears to comprise more than 40,000 disbound leaves from Quran manuscripts, both parchment and paper. It has more than 2,500 disbound leaves from non-Quranic manuscripts, primarily on parchment, some 170 loose manuscript bindings, about 2,200 paper manuscript codices, and some papyri that were added to the collection in the 20th century. To understand how the unique nature of the collection can aid research, I want to survey the surviving texts surrounding one well-represented scholar, Sahnun ibn Sa'id, a paragon of the Maliki school of Islamic law, which today is so firmly a part of the identity of North and West African Islam. Sahnun's famous book, the Mudawana, was considered second in importance only to Malik's Muwatta. As one would expect, Sahnun is well represented in the Karawan collection, including hundreds of folios of his Mudawana. Because the collection remains uncatalogued, it is impossible to give a complete overview of the manuscripts associated with them. In this paper, I'm going to focus only on those manuscripts that we know were dated before 300 of the Hijri, that is within 60 years of Sahnun's death. I do not need to emphasize to this audience just how extraordinary it is to have so many manuscripts that can be firmly dated to within a single generation of a man who died in 240. Altogether, we have 7 fragments of Sahnun's own text dated to 300 or earlier, several texts from previous generations of scholars, which Sahnun transmitted, and also texts from Sahnun's students, giving us a very well-rounded depiction of his scholarly activity. The oldest dated fragments in the Karawan collection are from Sahnun's Mudawana, the earliest of which is a single folio written before 235 of the Hijri, that is 5 years before Sahnun's death. And at the very bottom, you can perhaps just make out Sam'atuhu min Sahnun, and that's, you can't see that quite clearly, but and وَسَمِعَهُ Sa'id ibn Mohamed ibn Rashid. And then at the bottom, even harder to make out, is the actual, again, a secondary remark that says this was heard by Sahnun in the year 235. The next 2 oldest Mudawana fragments are colophons. One is dated by colophons. One is 17 folios long, written by Zaidain ibn Ismail in Rajab of 256. Like many early Karawan manuscripts, the margins follow the natural shape of the animal skin to maximize the use of space. The next fragment was written by Ahmed ibn Butar in 258 and is 8 folios long. And then the great scholar of these manuscripts from Germany, Miklos Murani, mentions having seen 2 more dated manuscripts of Sahnun's Mudawana with readers' remarks from 279 and 294. There are many, many more such manuscripts and much more research to be done on these, but this is what we have seen so far. In addition, we have 2 fragments of Sahnun's Mukhtalata. This first an 8 folio fragment that must have been written before 282 in Karawan, and 2 folios from the Kitab al-Hajj from the Mukhtalata, a scholar who heard it in 284. The precise relationship of the Mudawana and the Mukhtalata has been discussed at length by scholars and is frankly very difficult to ascertain from these short fragments. Again, with the hundreds and hundreds of folios we have of Sahnun's writings, we might be able to further understand the compilation history of these 2 texts. The Karawan collection also contains texts that appear to have been part of Sahnun's personal library. These are fragments from the previous generation, many of which have no other known manuscript witnesses. For example, we find legal writings by Abdulaziz ibn Abdullah ibn Abi Salama al-Majishun, who died in 164. He was a contemporary of Malik ibn Anas, who also taught in Medina. This manuscript was written down by Abdul Jabbar ibn Khalid ibn Imran Sulti, who died in 281, who transmitted it from Sahnun and taught it in 275. So we have all the information in a remark in the margins of the manuscript. We also have a 9 folio fragment of the Muwatta by Malik ibn Anas, written before 288. This is the oldest dated manuscript of this famous text. The transmission is from Malik to Ali ibn Ziyad, to Musa ibn Muawiyah. The date of 288 is derived again from a Samat remark, so the manuscript may in fact be older than that, but that provides us with a closing date for this manuscript. Mourani speculates that it was actually written within Sahnun's lifetime. Sahnun's student, Yahya ibn Omar al-Kinani, is mentioned in the Samat remark from Shawwal 262 on a manuscript of a collection of hadith attributed to another contemporary of Malik ibn Anas, Sufyan ibn Uyayna. Once again, the Karawan collection holds our earliest witness to the works of this key scholar. This single bifolio on parchment is heavily damaged with many Samat remarks that testify to its heavy use. This is an especially important text because hadith collections are poorly represented in Karawan. Miklos Mourani has devoted many articles, volumes, and editions to his study of the Egyptian scholar Abdullah ibn Wahb. 3 of the Karawan manuscripts from the scholar are dated to before 300 of the Hijri and were transmitted by Sahnun, allowing for direct comparison with texts that serve as primary sources for his Madawana. In other words, Sahnun quotes Malik, he quotes Abdullah ibn Wahb in his own text, and we can compare what he writes in the Madawana with what he transmitted from these scholars directly. The first is a 22 folio fragment of the Kitab al-Qadat al-Buyu' from Ibn Wahb's Muwatta. Now, Ibn Wahb wrote Muwatta, which is different from Malik's Muwatta, an independent work. And then there's a 14 folio fragment that includes chapters on poetry and song from Ibn Wahb's Jami', transmitted by Isa ibn Miskin from Sahnun, from Ibn Wahb. The incipit mentions that it was copied by Abdullah ibn Masrur, and a Samat remarks says that Ibn Masrur heard this from Ibn Miskin in his house in 290. And this is perhaps the earliest datable evidence that scholars' homes were the primary site for learning in this period. And then there is a 26 folio manuscript that contains the chapter on Ilm from the Jami', written by the same copyist, Abdullah ibn Masrur, although otherwise undated. Another major source for Sahnun's Madawana was the Egyptian scholar Ashhab ibn Abdul Aziz. Ashhab's works are also only known through the Karawan collection, and they include an 18 folio fragment of the Kitab al-Da'wa wal-Bayinat, transmitted by Sahnun's student Yahya ibn Omar al-Kinani. This manuscript is unusual. It's the oldest dated manuscript on Kaghed, although what you're looking at now is actually a parchment bifolio that surrounds the paper on the inside. So this is this very paper that we had just heard about, this Kaghed, locally produced paper. There are also examples of imported paper in Karawan, but this is that same rough paper that we see in West African manuscripts today. A reader's remark is from 273, well before Yahya ibn Omar's death in 289. And appended to this manuscript is an undated copy of a 36-line letter from Sahnun to Mohamed ibn Ziyad, a judge in Cordoba. The letter appears to have been written during Sahnun's appointment as Qadi of Karawan, but is the original may be dated to perhaps 234 to 238, although this copy was written centuries later. Several other texts by Ashhab ibn Abdul Aziz are also found in Karawan, including a 20 folio manuscript of Kitab al-Hajj, which has numerous Samat remarks, the oldest of which is 276, transmitted again through Sahnun. Yahya ibn Omar's name also appears in a manuscript of Abu Zayd Abdurrahman ibn Abi Ghamr's Majalis in a Samat remark from 272. This manuscript is 13 folios long, and Ibn Abi Ghamr was an Egyptian contemporary of Sahnun who died in 234. His text is devoted to auditions from Ibn al-Qasim, who is well known as the main authority for Sahnun's Mudawwana. The text was taught in the circles of Mohamed ibn Masroor al-Assal, an important scholar who appears many times in various manuscripts of the Caravan collection. Finally, a 12-folio fragment of one of Yahya ibn Omar's own texts, Kitab al-Hujjah fi Rad ala Shafi, demonstrates his engagement with the methods of Shafi. It is dated to 271, 18 years before al-Kinani's death. The collection holds at least one other response to Shafi, whose works were apparently well known in Kairouan, though we have no trace of them today. So I hope this brief survey of some of the Kairouan manuscripts surrounding the life of Sahnun ibn Sa'id gives a sense of the quality and value of this collection, as well as some of the many possibilities for research into its lesser known legal manuscripts. In comparison with Kairouan's sumptuous, expensive Quran manuscripts, these early legal texts are generally written on rough parchment that shows the wear and tear of generations of readers. Precisely why they were kept in the Maqsura of the City Aqba Mosque to begin with is somewhat of a mystery. But the appeals of Muhammad Bayram at the end of the 19th century led to a preservation effort that continues today. As for future generations, their ability to read and study these unparalleled cultural treasures depends on the current work of the staff at the National Library for the Preservation and Conservation of Parchment and Manuscripts in Kairouan. Happily, they are in good hands. The chief cataloger, Afaf Hanouchi, has just defended her PhD on the history of the collection, and the chief conservator and director of the lab, Saleh Mehdi bin Hamouda, depicted here, is currently writing his PhD under the direction of Professor Ibrahim Shibouh, who himself was a past director of the National Library in Tunis and one of the founders of the National Laboratory. Together, their team is undertaking a new inventory of the collection in preparation for a scientifically based catalog. So just a few insights into the lab and some of the amazing work being done on the conservation of these old Quran manuscripts. For example, here is a before picture, and here is one after the conservation, and you can see that they are really working at the highest level to preserve these important texts. The Kairouan Manuscript Project that I represent today is devoted to the care, management, study, and promotion of this collection. In December 2019, we invited 4 members of the staff of the lab to Germany for a week to tour conservation facilities in Hamburg and Berlin. Since then, the Kairouan Manuscript Project, funded by the Center for the Study of Manuscript Cultures at Universität Hamburg, has supported a regular program of training, including a week-long course on conservation in June of 2020 during the pandemic, delivered remotely by Marco Di Bella. As you may know, Tunisia has been devastated by the coronavirus pandemic, and Kairouan has been hit particularly hard. Yet despite all this, work on the laboratory continues. It served as the host of an international conference on manuscripts this past June, and the laboratory has also begun implementing a grant from the Barakat Trust to support 4 conservation interns, fulfilling its ambitions to train the next generation of Tunisian conservators. Currently, there is no reading room nor any dedicated space for those who wish to undertake research on the manuscripts. And it's a major goal of both the laboratory and the Kairouan Manuscript Project to facilitate the work of researchers in the future. Despite the hardships of the present moment, these efforts are gladly undertaken by all who are involved because the knowledge that this collection contains a precious inheritance from scholars, scribes, and artisans who produced these manuscripts. Thank you very much.
Very much. Thank you, Sue. Thank you very, very much, Professor Jonathan. Parler de la bibliothèque des manuscrits de Al-Qayrouan.
I have pointed out some of the Quranic manuscripts and also the project that you have founded, and that there should be a number of researchers that could benefit from this project. Thank you very much, sir, for your very informative presentation. And now I give the floor to Dr. Drame once more for him to continue his presentation, and I hope that the technical problem he had has been solved. Dr. Drame, can you hear me? Dr. Diagayeté? Yes, I can hear. You have for your presentation 25 minutes. And I hope if in order to continue the presentation that you keep the audio and deactivate the video, and on our part we will show your PowerPoint presentation.
Peace be upon you. I can see you, I can hear you. We can hear you as well. Please don't use the camera. You can switch the camera off. You have only 15 minutes to give this speech. So we talk about the resources that we have. There are many resources, and this helps in keeping the Islamic heritage on different levels. And like the libraries of the mosques and the private libraries, academies, and the centers for teaching Islam, and also the Sufi orders, and also the other Salafi institutions, Islamic institutions. And we have a lot of treasuries, library. We have them everywhere, and especially that there are some of them that were actually destroyed because of, let's say, the floods and the fires and the water of the rain. Well, if we talk about this, we want to say that that a lot of the this is the historian said, Sheikh Musa Kamra, that a lot of these books has been lost and has been buried. We want to talk about the French and how they cared about the heritage and the manuscripts in the west of Africa. So we can say that it was actually they took special attention for it. And when they came, they found that the French, when they came, they found that the Arabic is controlling the place, but if they want to apply their own policies, they have to change the Arabic language, which is, they started a contradicting way against the Arabic language. And we say that they wanted this is to get in control. So this is, they started to use it for different reasons, that they want to change the Arabic language, and this is for control in the area where they where they are staying. And that's what we say. Though at this point, the French Institute, the essential French Institute for Black Africa, this has been established in 1936, and it is the French Institute for Black Africa. And this was with a decree by the French ruler at this time, Mr. Breuer. And he started his researches, and they started to publish it in 1939. And in 1963, after the independence of Senegal, so Ivan has become part of Dakar University. And then it was changed. It was changed in 1966 by the name. They changed the name of the French Institute to the Essential Institute of West Africa. And in 1986, it was changed by naming it it was named Diop after the death of the Senegalese scientist Cheikh Diop. And they have established, they established it in 1965 at the beginning of January. The French researcher and the very well-known, Orientalist Wincy Mansour Monté, he started doing this, and he started the research center and the studies of Islam there in this Essential Institute of Black Africa, Cheikh Diop. And this is they wanted actually to preserve all the kinds or the different kinds of these studies. And when he started it, he wanted to collect and he wanted to divide and categorize all the manuscripts that are written in Arabic and in Fulani or Ajami. And this is what they did. And then this is what he did. So, these actually are the manuscripts that survived all the policies that was trying to stop it by the colonialism. And after that, we had different people managing this Essential Institute. And the first one, let's say Theodore Monod from 1938 to 1968. And then we had after that Wincy Mansour Monté, and he was from I think he was the second one, and he started from 1965 to 1968. And Pierre, and the third one, we had we are having the 10th now. If we want to divide it and categorize it, we can categorize it to different groups. We have categorized and arranged it, and each one will have the name of the collector or the author of it. This is as a kind of acknowledgement for his work, and actually to keep his name eternal. And some of these, let's say, the group that has 4,000 paper, and this is Willard. And we have Garden group, and this is has been given by Garden to the Essential Institute, and this one's in 1939. And this is actually talking about Fota Tor and Fota Galon and Ma'asina. And also we have Brevet group, and this cares about the historical documents written in the Arabic in the Arabic script and from in different regions. And there is the Fikare group, and this was in 1908. This is when it was established by the colonel Fikari. It was about studying the Fulani language. And we have also the collection of Kramer, and it is from 1920 till 1880. This is actually has original texts that hasn't been published yet. And it's talking about the Filtawi, this is talking about the fallen nation. And we have also the collection of Sheikh Musa Kamara that died in 1965, and it is related to Fota Toro and also the other districts of Senegal and neighboring countries. And we have the collection of Vincent and Mansour Monti, and this is cares about the history and sociology, and it has also a lot of other texts. And there is also the collection of Amr Samb, and it has talking about history, geography, mathematics, and also astronomy. And we find that the richest of all these collections is the first one that has been done by Mr. Willard between 1939 and 1927. And the importance of it is that it covers the biggest numbers of country, and it has the largest amount of documents, and it is about 4,000 paper. And then we actually start to classify them according to the region where they come from. I wanted to talk about also we wanted to talk also about how it was developed and about the most important authors that we have. And we have a lot of problems that are related to the manuscripts. Some of the families that owns these manuscripts, they don't want to give it to us, and this is causing a problem that we have. About the end, I would like to say what we want to ask for. We want the people that care so much about the heritage and Islamic heritage and culture. So if you want actually to preserve a big part and a very important part about the Islamic Arabic culture, so we can say that we need we want them to invite them to come and think about the means of helping this division. And I would like to say that we have humanitarian message that we would like to deliver. So this is a part of the African heritage in Western Africa, and from me, you have my thanks to everyone. I would like to thank you very much, Doctor, and for your nice intervention. And you talked about the preservation centers of the manuscripts, and you talked about some of the mosques, and also you have talked on the Orientalists, and also you talk about the center that you work for, and all the management that or the people that actually were like presidents of this place, and all the classification of these different manuscripts, and then the groups, the different collections of groups of manuscripts, and all the challenges that you are facing. And you talked also about the families that do not want to give you the manuscripts that they own, and which is a problem that we face with a lot of families that do not want to share what they have or donate what they have from the manuscripts. And this is a great problem that we have to raise awareness for these families to understand the importance of it, So we still have minutes. We'll check about all the questions that has been proposed. And let me tell you about the questions that we have here. Dr. Diagayeté. I can hear you. Can you hear the Q&A? I can see some of the questions. There is a question about Dr. Binebine. Are there codicological studies for the manuscripts written in Arabic from West Africa? The second question is there. That has music composition. Or related to music. And the third question. Because although we have the actually when we talk about the we say that in composing books and in having African heritage, there is a big part of the Moroccan heritage, oral heritage is not that hasn't been written. So this is for Dr. Jonathan, another one. What is the way to actually to date all the manuscripts from the Caravan collection? Is it according to the day it was copied, or by understanding the carriers of this text? How do you know the dating of it? How do you do it? So is it through the copying, time of the copying, or because of the carriers of it, of the text? And is there this is for Professor Binebine. So is there any in the Royal Library of Manuscripts anything that that goes to the Morabitiya, Dr. Chaouki? This is for Dr. Chaouki, for the Morabitiya and the Royal Library. These are the questions that we have gotten so far in the chat box. So we open the floor for answering. So so Dr. Ahmed Chaouki Binebine, we open this floor for you to speak. So please, Prof. I have 4 questions. This is for the codicologist studies for the manuscripts written in Arabic letters. So we talk about the heritage. So this is all was in the 19th and the 20th century. So the idea is about the collection. No ecological study unless we have a lot of these collections and manuscripts, I mean. And what they have is putting an index for it. And this was by the end of the 80s. And they published the maximum number of manuscripts in the libraries of England. And they studied groups of it and collections of it. As far as I know, these collections, this doesn't help us with the codicological studies. This is in my humble opinion. Are there, the other question, do we have musical notes? I have never seen a musical note. Maybe there are, but I don't know. Maybe I don't know of it. So the third one, when we talk about when we talk about actually the heritage of Morocco, and whether it is oral, if there is an oral one, but there are people that did that. And this is the history of Saadi, Abu Ahmed al-Saadi. This is the and the history of Fitaj. And there is the book of Marash Saud. All these, the source of it, it is also oral. So there are many of them that were oral at the beginning, and then they were put into manuscripts and texts. And some of the others that were put from oral, they have burned really. And when we talk about al-Murabatiyya, so when we talk about that, we have one from 562 Hijri, and we have Riwayat al-Baji from Murabatiyya, that you asked about it, whether we have it in the Royal Library or not. And this is this dates back to 493 Hijri. And this is these are Murabatiyya sources that we have in the Royal Library. Thank you very much, Professor Jonathan.
Thank you so much for this question. These remarks that are at the end of the manuscript, but it's reasonable to question whether these remarks were simply copied by later copyists onto new manuscripts. So we have to look not only at that internal evidence, but also at external evidence. For instance, the support, the parchment or the paper, and the quality of that. All of the earliest manuscripts, with the exception of this one manuscript from Ashab ibn Abdulaziz, are on parchment. So immediately we have this distinction between parchment and paper, and parchment then being used. This is also a very rough parchment. So it's not like the fine parchment you see reserved for Qurans. This is, you have, for example, holes from damage from insects that were made before the skin was used to make the parchment. You have a cutout from the leg of the animal, from the shoulder, because the entire parchment was used. So as opposed to fine Quran manuscripts where you'd have just the very center of the animal skin being used. So this tells us that these were made for daily use. They were inexpensive or relatively inexpensive. So we have the support itself, and then we have the script. So we were discussing the Kufic script, which is typical for African manuscripts. And Professor Binebine talked about the one possibility that this connected to Kairouan. In fact, we see that particular ancient form of Kufic script in Kairouan. And moreover, we have actual autographs. That is to say, we have manuscripts that we know we have the author author's own handwriting. And because of this collection, we can see multiple manuscripts written by, for instance, Abu al-Arab al-Tamimi, an important Qayrawani scholar. So we have his own books written in his own hand, and then books that he copied. And likewise, with someone like Sahnun, we have books that were written in his lifetime. We have Kinani's books that he took from somebody else, and that he appears as the author on one and a student on the other. So the collection talks to one another. And so therefore we can have high confidence that these Sama' remarks and these endowment remarks are accurate, and that the dates that are on them are trustworthy.
Thank you so much, Professor. أقدم
can we get the oldest dated of the Qayrawan collection? Yes, repeat, please.
Yes, I see it. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, there have been several studies on these. There is a study by Werner Schwarz in German, and there's studies by Ibrahim Shabuh in Arabic. I myself have not focused on the Awqaf remarks, the Tahbis remarks, and so I really have no expertise on that myself.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you to the presenters. I would thank you for these enriching presentations. I would like to apologize for any technical problem because this happened unintentionally and it is out of our hand, and hopefully through these papers we were enriched with information. Thank you very much to the presenters and to the director of the Manuscript Center in the Bibliothèque Alexandria, Dr. Medhat Isa. Thank you, Dr. Diagayeté, for chairing this interesting panel. And it seems that there is a question to Dr. Ahmed Chaouki Binebine, maybe if he would like to answer the question. Dr. Binebine, can you hear me? There is a question by one of the presenters saying, is there in the Royal Library, and I believe maybe the Hassani Library, manuscripts that go back to the Murabiti era? I have already replied to this question. There are copies from Bukhari. 2 copies from the Baji account and Asili and Ibn Sa'ida. All of these in the Hassani Library, and also Muslim, Sahih Muslim, and Abu Dawood, and Riwayat al-Arba. In the 4th century AH, all of these are in the Hassanite Library. Thank you, Dr. Chaouki, and we're always happy to see you, especially after many years. Dr. Medhat, I remember meeting you years ago and hoping to see you again in other events, and then you disappeared from the face of the earth. No, I hope that we will have more future events, and that you will enrich us with your scientific knowledge and scholarly knowledge. And unfortunately, we had to conduct this conference via Zoom virtually, where it was already organized to be a big event that would be attended by all of you in person. And hopefully we will have another panel at 4 o'clock Eastern European time. And I invite the people attending on Facebook and the pages dedicated to the conference to attend with us the coming panel at exactly 4 o'clock Eastern European time. Thank you very much to all the presenters, Dr. Diagayeté also, who chaired this panel, and Dr. Ahmed Chaouki Binebine, who always adds much information to us, and Dr. Djim Othman, Drame, and also Professor Prokop for his insightful paper and also his replies to the questions we got from the audience. Thank you, and we meet again at 4 o'clock in another important panel of the African Manuscript in Arabic Script conference. Thank you, and peace be upon you. Thank you.